Good morning, everybody. This is Stephen Pugh of the Home Bible College. I want to do another video in my series on the King James Bible. Now, many years ago, I can't remember what year it was. I'll be able to tell you in a minute. But many years ago, I wrote a commentary on the preface to the Authorized Version of 1611, or I called it "What the Authorized Version translators had to say about their translation to the world." It also included the preface to the Revised Standard Version, the New International, and the preface to Young's Literal Version. So, it's been a matter of some interest to me that the Authorized Version of 1611 is seen today by some good Christian people to be the sole Word of God. Some even go so far as to say that the original manuscripts may be corrected by the use of this translation. I was fascinated to discover what the translators thought of their own work. This little book may help to lay to rest some of the issues that divide believers of today. What follows is the text of the 1611 preface, paragraph by paragraph, followed by a commentary on each book. The preface was written by Miles Smith, and it was printed by Robert Barker. What's very interesting in the preface is that he doesn't quote, if he wants to quote a scripture text, he doesn't quote from the King James Version. He quotes from the Geneva Bible. At the time, the Geneva Bible was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. Everybody had one. The king had one, the queen had one, and they've come down to us today. So this book was originally written in 2008. So then it begins, and I'll read it as it says. It says, "The best things have been culminated." Okay, that's a big word. So paragraph 1 says, "Zeal to promote the common good, whether it by devising anything ourselves or revising that which hath been laboured by others, deserveth certainly much respect and esteem, but yet findeth but cold entertainment in the world. It is welcomed with suspicion instead of love, with emulation instead of thanks. And if there be any hole left for cavil to enter, and cavil, if it do not find a hole, will make one, it is sure to be misconstrued and in danger to be condemned. This will easily be granted by as many as know story or have any experience. For was there ever any projected that savoured any way of newness of renewing? But the same endured many a storm of gainsaying or opposition. A man would think that civility, wholesome laws, learning and eloquence, synods and church maintenance, that we speak of no more things of this kind, should be as safe as a sanctuary and out of shot, as they say, that no man would lift up the heel, no, nor dog move his tongue against the motioners of them. For by the first we are distinguished from true beasts, led with sensuality. By the second we are bridled and restrained from outrageous behaviour, and from doing of injuries, whether by fraud or by violence. By the third we are enabled to inform and reform others by the light and feeling that we have attained unto ourselves. Briefly, by the fourth, being brought together to a parley face to face, we sooner compose our differences than by writing, which are endless. And lastly, that the church be sufficiently provided for is so agreeable to good reason and conscience, that these mothers are holden to be less cruel, to kill their children as soon as they are born, that those nursing fathers and mothers, whosoever they be, that withdraw from them who hang upon their breasts, and upon whose breasts again they themselves do hang, to receive the spiritual and sincere milk of the word, livelihood and support for their estates. Thus it is apparent that these things which we speak of are of most necessary use, and therefore that none, either without absurdity, can speak against them, or without note of wickedness can spurn against them. Now, I don't know what you thought of what I just read there. It was very difficult to read it, and probably very difficult to hear. Probably. The important thing to say is this, is that this is what's called the King's English. This is the English of the court of King James I. Okay? So my commentary on it is very simple. This preface begins with a statement of disappointment that this work, which should, they feel, be universally received with respect and esteem, is actually met with a very cold response. They say that the king and his translators have been falsely accused of a crime in producing this translation. Clearly, the authorized version was not universally welcomed. So it's very strong language, and what the king is saying with his chief translator, what he's saying is that the people of England consider that the production of the King James Version was a crime in itself, and that the baby should be killed at birth. They didn't like it. They already had a Geneva Bible which was excellent, that had had 50 years of revision. So it was very, very good indeed. However, it didn't meet with their political and ecclesiastical objections. So the authorized version was not universally welcome. The reformers in England already had the excellent translation, the Geneva Bible. It was scholarly, it was well printed, and had had the benefit of years of corrections. The Puritans loved the Geneva Bible and refused the authorized version out of hand, mainly because of its glaring typographical errors and its bias, encouraged by the King James, towards Presbyterianism and ecclesiastical policy. The translators concede that the authorized version is in danger of being universally condemned and call for a truce on the endless battles that the translation seems to have started. The translators appeal in emotional language to all mothers and fathers to welcome their translation as a newborn child and not to murder it at the first opportunity. And thus they infer that the AV rejectors are comparable to child murderers. This new authorized version had certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons. Let's read a little more, shall we? So this is now paragraph 2, and I'll read it the best I can. It's not easy to read. Yet for all that, the learned know that certain worthy men, anarchists with others, have been brought to untimely death for none other fault, but for seeking to reduce their countrymen to good order and discipline, and that in some commonwealths, the Lockery, it was made a capital crime once to motion the making of a new law for the abrogating of an old, through the same were most pernicious, and that certain Ketio the elder, which would be counted pillars of the state and patterns of virtue and prudence, could not be brought for a long time to give way to good letters and refined speech, but bear themselves as adverse from them as from rocks or boxes of poison. And fourthly, that he was no babe, but a great clerk, Gregory the Divine, that gave forth, and in writing to remain to posterity, in passion peradventure, but yet he gave forth that he had not seen any profit to come by any synod or meeting of the clergy, but rather contrary. And lastly, against church maintenance and allowance, in such short as the ambassadors and the messengers of the great King of Kings should be furnished. It is not unknown what of fiction or fable, so it is esteemed for no better by the reporter himself, Norculus, through superstitious, was devised, namely, that at such a time as the professors and teachers of Christianity in the Church of Rome, then a true church, were liberally endowed, a voice, forsooth, was heard from heaven, saying, "Now is poison poured forth into the church," etc. Thus, not only as often as we speak as one saith, but also as oft as we do anything of note or consequence, we subject ourselves to everyone's censure. And happy is he that is least tossed upon tongues, for utterly to escape the snatch of them it is impossible. If any man conceit that this is the lot and the portion of the meaner sort only, and that princes are privileged by their high estate, he is deceived, as the sword devoureth as well as the other, as it is in 2 Samuel chapter 11 verse 25. Nay, as the great commander charged his soldiers in a certain battle to strike at no part of the enemy, but at the face. And as the king of Syria commanded his chief captains to fight neither with small nor great, save only against the king of Israel, 1 Kings chapter 22 verse 31, so it is true that envy striketh most spitefully at the fairest and at the chiefest. David was a worthy prince, and no man to be compared to him for his first deeds, and yet for as worthy an act as ever he did, even for bringing back the ark of God in solemnity, he was scorned and scoffed at by his own wife. 2 Samuel 6 verse 16. Solomon was greater than David, though not in virtue, yet in power, and by his power and wisdom he built a temple to the Lord, such a one as was the glory of the land of Israel and the wonder of the whole world. But was that his magnificence liked of by all? We doubt it. Otherwise, why do they lay it on his son's dish and call upon him for easing the burden? Make, they say, the glorious servitude of thy father and his sure yoke lighter. That's in 1 Kings 12 verse 1. Belike he had charged them with some levies and troubled them with some carriages. Hereupon they raise up a tragedy and wish in their heart the temple had never been built. So hard a thing it is to please all, even when we please God best, and do seek to approve ourselves to everyone's conscience. Now, I'm very familiar with this preface. If you understood all that, you did very well. I tell you, it is not easy to read, and it's very difficult to understand. But this is the King's English in 1611. It was not easy at all to understand. So this is my commentary. Next, the translators appeal to the nobility and to the educated men. They speak of the anarchy that needs to be resisted to bring in peace and order to society. The greatest fear of the ruling classes was anarchy. They consider themselves to be of worthy motives. Comparing themselves with the noble warriors and the biblical characters, they accuse their critics of being barbarians. Wow. You know, the tone we receive from this is this. It's a very bitter statement in the preface that the King James Version was not liked at all. And they give lots of biblical examples of people that did great things but were not liked. They put themselves next to the biblical characters to show how worthy they are, to show how great they are. And sadly, it didn't cut much ice. The people of those days did not accept the things that they were saying. So we're going to read some more, but we'll read it next time. And we look forward to catching up with you next time. Have a wonderful day. And by the way, please like and subscribe to this channel. It'll help us a great deal. Have a great day. Bye for now.